Hey everybody, good morning. It is Tracking Pat here doing the live video, and today we're going to have a special visit with all of you out there to talk about our new TRAK VMC2. If some of you are seeing this for the very first time, it may look very familiar to you because it looks a lot like the old TRAK 2-op. It is basically the same iron. However, the electronics and everything have changed and been upgraded to become an RMX control, so therefore we have all the power of all our new VMCs and our bed mills combined with all the versatility of what the 2-op already had. So hence the new name. This is definitely a production machine. Not that it can't still be moved around the shop if you need to. Okay, but before we get too far into this, I want to remind you guys, if you got some questions, please send them in on the chat line and we'll answer them one by one as soon as we can. I got the crew here to help me out, so they'll interrupt me whenever they need to. I would think most of the basic questions about how the RMX works should already be answered for you, but I want to give you a little lowdown on what we're about to do. So I've got an island pocket that's got 5 islands in it, and I'm going to cut that, and we are going to make a little bit of noise during that part. Now keep in mind that I'm trying to make it where the video can catch most of this, so I've already cut about 3/4 of the roughing process out of this pocket so that we can also cut down on time as well as noise. I'm in the run mode right now, and if you notice in here by the resume button, I've actually gone to the chip clear section of the run mode and jogged it out of the way, shut the air off, stuff like that, so that I could take a look at where it's at. And then when we're ready to go, I'm going to push resume, walk it back into the material, and then let it cut. So with the air blowing to get the chips out of the way, it is a little noisy. I wouldn't imagine it's got more than a minute or two left. But before we get into that part, does anybody have any questions yet that you want me to answer about the machine or the control itself before we get into showing a little bit about how it works? Have you seen anything yet, Blake?
I've not.
Okay, so it looks like we're pretty good and ready to go. Okay, so I'm going to do my best to stay out of the way of the control for you guys, all right? But what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to open the door just so you see what we got going on first, okay? So let me climb over here a little bit. Just like the 2-op, the door opens the same way so that it keeps the machine fairly skinny. And as you can tell in here in my pocket so far, I've got about 3/4 of the roughing pass done. I've got a 3-flute, 3/8 end mill in here, and I'm only using air to cut with. Now that brings up a special point. The 2-op didn't used to have this feature, but I have air as well as coolant now so that I can use either or like the rest of our VMCs do. And so you can see I'm just up here out of the way in the chip clear mode so that I can get in there and get a good angle on what's going on, okay? So as we back off and close the door, I'm going to bring this thing in and let it start running again. All right, so we're good, Bill? So what I'm simply going to do is push resume, and I want to remind you guys, in the run mode, when you go to resume, you can either just push go, or you can actually track it back into where it was at, okay? You'll also see over here that I've got the air on auto, so as soon as I start moving, it should turn it back on. I'm going to use the tracking just to get myself going here, okay? It looks good to me. You'll notice that we are using the adaptive machining right now to rough all the material out of the pocket. And then once I get most of the roughing done, I am going to switch to a 1/4-inch end mill to get into the portions of the pocket that I can't get into with the 3/8. I'm hopeful that when I switch to the 1/4-inch tool, I'll be able to shut the air off and it'll be a bit quieter for us as well. Okay, I'm going to shut the air off, and unless I hear it loading up or something like that, hopefully I can leave it off so you can hear us talk a little bit better. Okay, so I'm going to let it run. Want me to stop?
No, it's fine. Someone's asking, can an RMX console be added to the original 2-op? Are you going to answer the question?
It cannot. So the question that we have is whether or not you can add the RX control to the original 2-op. And unfortunately you cannot, because the entire electronics is different. Just like if you had an older DPM mill with an SX control or something like that on it, the electronics is completely different, and therefore it is not possible at this time. If you see a really great use for having the ability to have all this extra stuff and you really like what your 2-op is, I would talk to your local rep and see whether or not it's something we could maybe trade in and move yourself into this control. Obviously, we know you got a whole lot more capability than you did with the 2-op when it was designed. And part of that has to do with the fact that, you know, the original 2-op was designed to be a secondary operations machine. Therefore, it was limited on its capability, and the only way to get more of that capability was to use the SX offline, or to use G-code and things like that, which I realize a lot of the stuff that you see in the RX you can do with G-code. So that's probably the best way to do that with a 2-op if you need this capability. But it is really nice that now you'll be able to have all of this power in the same control, right? Okay, so you want to pan back out a little bit? Bear with me for a second, guys. Let me know when you're ready. Bill? Good? All right, so as you probably noticed at the end of that run, like the other VMCs, when it finishes a program, it's going to put the final tool away and pull out the first tool so that it's ready to make the next part. When I set the part up in the vise, I used the mag stop so that I could just slide my block up against it and have my zeros correct. So if I had another part to do, all I would simply do is put it in the vise, slide it up, lock the vise, take the mag stop out, push go. All right, so a lot of those capabilities that we have in our other VMCs, we do have now in the VMC2, okay? Here I'm at the end of the program, right? So I'm gonna do a few things just to give you a little more idea of what I have going on here. I'm gonna switch over to the program mode, and I'm gonna show you how I program the part so you have a little bit better feel for it. In my first event, I did an aux event, which was just to simply automatically turn the air on. But you'll notice in here I could turn coolant on, or if I was using an indexer, I could send a pulse to the indexer, use the auxiliary output that's also there as an option. And you'll notice there's a part change position too, which sends it to the position it's at right now, okay? So as I swipe forward, I just did a face mill to wipe out the top of the part to give me a clean surface to work with. I did a rectangular pocket just to knock the corners off, okay? And then in here is where all the magic really happens. So here's my island pocket with a rectangular outside, right? So in here, pretty basic. I got a 3x3 inch block. I'm rapiding to 50 above, and I'm going a 1/4 inch deep. And more importantly, if for any reason any of you viewers out there haven't seen very much of the RX yet, I want to point out the fact that I'm cutting to full depth and I'm running it at 60 inches a minute while I'm machining. Okay, and over here on the left side where my information panel is, I went into my options page and I made some changes. Okay, and some of the changes that I made is I was originally set up to just cut with a parallel toolpath. I switched that over to an adaptive toolpath so that I could run it at those feeds and speeds. And then I changed my entry from plunge or zigzag to helix so that I could also get into the material a lot faster. Sometimes I might even want to choose my start location, but I knew there was going to be multiple places where I had a helix into the material because it wasn't all connective. I did adjust my step over down to 20%. The default is usually at 35, but I wanted to make sure that cutting it dry, I didn't make myself look like a fool by snapping a tool in front of y'all. So you'll see in here I've got my minimum curvature radius set at 10 thousandths. Standard is 40, but again, to get that tool to fit in there and remove all the material, I had to make some adjustments. So what I'm really showing you is the fact that you've got all kinds of things that you can do in order to make it machine the way you want to. And of course, with coolant, I could have ramped a lot of that stuff up, cut it even faster, and so on and so forth. But this gives you an idea on how much power the control actually has now in just something as simple as a pocket. Now, of course, our older controls couldn't do a pocket that had multiple islands, so that's part of the RX stuff too, the fact that you can have any shape island, any shape outside of the pocket, as many islands as you want, and 3 different ways to machine it. So that's basically how I designed it. The rest of it is just one pocket after another, and I use the AGE capability to figure out the pocket in the middle like so, as you can see as I highlight through here. Okay, so that should give you a little bit of an idea. But now that I'm at the end of the program, I just kind of want to go over some of the other features that are in the RX. A lot of them you should be used to already, right? So position events, drilling and tapping are pretty much the same. If you haven't seen the newest feature under drilling, we do have the ability to do helical drilling now with an end mill. So that is a feature that we've added. Bolt hole patterns are the same, but you do have the helical drilling allowed in there too. Mills and arcs are basically the same. Your profiles are the same except for the fact that you can now have more than one tool. So you can rough with one tool and finish with another. Face mill, pretty much the same. The biggest thing that we changed in face mills now is the fact that you don't have to cut in a zigzag manner. You can now tell it to only cut unidirectionally and it'll pick up each time, which is probably more important in a DPM when it's throwing the chips at me than it is in here where it's contained. But nonetheless, it is in there as an option. The pockets, again, you've got 2 tools available, right? So that is really important when I'm doing something like this where there's places I know my tool's going to get trapped. In our older controls, you had to have a tool that fit into all the geometry, or the machine would argue with you, give you an error and tell you to make adjustments. Now what will happen is it'll look at all where it is and it'll say, okay, I'm going to machine all this with tool number 1, and then I'm going to switch over to tool number 2 and pick out what's left. Okay, I'm going to show you a little bit of that in a moment, but I just want to walk through the rest. So subs and copies are the same stuff. You've got your copy and paste in there, your clipboard, right? You've got repeats, mirror images, rotations. Under the more key, I've got my helix, my engraving. Engraving has improved greatly. Although the font is still the standard font, you can now engrave in a mirror image at an angle on any given radius, so you've got a lot more flexibility with engraving. Thread milling pretty much is the same, and your aux function I already showed you, and of course the pause event. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go over to the setup mode, and I'm going to do this just basically to show you this tool path, okay? And it is going to take it a second or two to figure out the tool path, because it really is a pretty complex tool path, even though I didn't need G-code or an outside computer to program it. So it has to walk through all the roughing sections. It has to walk through the actual rest machining, which is the part of the machining that you see in the lighter color here. Bill, can you see that good on the screen? Yeah, okay. So you'll notice here in the darker blue color, that's all the original roughing that it comes into, and it wipes out all that material. And it automatically knows where it can't fit. So then when it changed tools, the part that we witnessed in the machining there is the lighter bluish green color. And that goes in and it picks out those few places that tool number 1 couldn't get in there, and it uses that same tool to finish the part. Now, if I were to put a Z finish cut in the pocket, I also have the choice of telling it whether to do that floor with both tools to save time, or to do the whole thing with just the finish tool, so that I make sure that I have a nicer finish without having to change tools in the middle. So that's a little bit more versatility you get out of the machine. Okay? A question that comes up a lot of times, just as a side note to entertain you guys a little bit, people ask why we use the colors we use on the screen. And I found out the reason for that is people who are colorblind can't always see the same colors as someone like myself who isn't can see. So fortunately for us, one of our top software writers is colorblind. So we let him pick the colors that he can see the differentiation from one part to another. And I always wondered why on a lot of the controls we use a color that's fuchsia at best. It's because it's very visible to people who are colorblind. Okay, so there's a little side note for you guys to use, all right? Now, for some reason, we get a lot of people who don't think that our machines can actually do 3D surfacing, okay? Which is ludicrous, really, but I think most of that comes from probably our competition, telling people that, and people sometimes don't have any reason to believe different, so they do believe it. We get that question a lot. I really wanted to set up and cut a 3D part in here today. Problem is that in order to cut a 3D part, first of all, it's going to take a long time. Secondly, I really need to use coolant or at least air because I'm just going to load up my tool. I did try to do some before we went on the air, and I kept loading up the tools and stuff like that. So I'm going to show you the whole process, but we're going to do a video that's not on a live stream where we actually talk and get more in depth with 3D surfacing, and we're going to make some parts for that. And you'll see that in that video when it comes up, okay? We will do it on the same machine. But let me show you a little bit about what I'm talking about. So on the side of the control, we've got 4 USB ports to put our memory sticks in, but I'm going to go to program in and out like I normally would. And my good buddy Bruce Kloss, he made me this spherical program right here. So I'm going to load that in here. Now, when you've got a 3D program, you do not have the ability to see anything in the program mode because it's all G-code still. All right, but I am going to do a couple things. So I'm going to go to the tool table. And in here, I would probably be making this part in tool room ops because I don't need the tool changer anyway. All right, but you'll notice here in the tool table, if you haven't seen this before, I've got my program tools, I've got the tools in my ATC, and I've got the tools in my library. I'm just going to use my library tools and eliminate needing to use the ATC today. So I'm going to look in here, and my ball nose end mill is my finishing tool, right? So that's going to be tool number 2. Imports it into the program. And then I'm going to look for my 3A standard end mill, which is right here, and that's going to be tool number 1. Okay? So now that I've got that, I'm going to close the tool table. And I'm going to move over here, and I'm going to go into the edit mode. So you'll notice in here that I have a G-code editor now. I've also got the ability to update G-code. Under the G-code editor, you're going to see the same G-code information you're used to seeing for any G-code program you've ever run before. I have the ability to search for certain lines or tool numbers or things like that in case I need to do some editing. Okay? And other than that, it should be what you're normally used to looking for. Now, on top of that, I also have the ability to add notes and pictures. So if this is a job I was going to do sometime later in the future, I would probably take some pictures, add them through the USB stick to add the pictures into the program, and then I could update all of that into one file. Doing that would allow me that if I have to make some outside changes to that program, I could bring the new adjusted program in and go to Update GCD, which is going to add the pictures and notes to the updated G-code file that I made. So that's kind of what you're seeing underneath all of this, just so you're aware. Okay, now if I go to the setup mode, I can look at the tool path and it'll crunch the numbers for this as well. It's going to be a little busier on your screen, of course, because as you can tell, it's got a lot of roughing to do before I ever get to the spherical shape of this part. But if I take 2 fingers, I can actually move it enough that I think you'll get an idea of what we're looking at. Right? Can you kind of see that, or is it just too much blue?
No, you can see it.
Can see it? All right. So you can kind of see here where all the helix is that Bruce put in here to come down, remove the material. And when I get all done, then it's going at a 45-degree angle as it surfaces back and forth across the part. I got about 3/4 of the way through the part before I just couldn't control my end mill loading up. And part of that's my own fault for not having the right end mill to do the job. But I think you guys all get a good idea of how it works and what's involved in doing the 3D surfacing. So next time somebody tells you that Proto-TRAK can't do this stuff, you tell them Tracking Pat said, oh yes you can. All right. Any other questions so far, guys? Doing okay? Well, good. Maybe now that everyone's seen the RMX for 3 or 4 different times now, most of the basic questions are gone, which is fantastic. I tell you all the time in the videos, and I'm going to tell you again today that, you know, the best thing you can do for any of our products, including this one, is to reach out to your local TRAK rep, because he'll take you to see one, all right, and then you'll have a much better idea. Soon we'll have them in the showrooms across the country, and so you'll be able to go over there, make some parts, cut some parts, do all of that stuff, and get you a much better idea. One other thing I want to show you, even though it's going to disappear off of the side of the camera, is the fact that when you do still need to move the machine, it folds away pretty small. So I can still push it down an aisle if I need to, okay? I think it's going to be more common is that right, Bill, right there? Cool. It's going to be more common.
Several people have asked what the maximum spindle RPM is.
So the maximum spindle RPM is 10K. And that'll help you a little bit. And of course, the feeds and speeds, like the other machines, are going to be dependent upon whether you're in tool room ops or production ops, right? You know, so if I'm in tool room ops, I always want you to think about this thing running kind of like a DPM, right? So in tool room ops, it does not use the tool changer. It maxes out at 5,000 RPM. It maxes out at 400 inches per minute, okay? You can run a program that's in program ops, or production ops, I'm sorry, but still have the tools mounted in there manually. So I don't have to use the ATC. It'll simply stop and say, hey, load this tool, and then push go. So if I've got a larger tool or a longer tool than what fits in the ATC or what I want to have in the ATC, then simply just load it from the library, and it'll ask for it accordingly as we go. All right?
Tool holder type?
It's BT30, so all your tooling will be BT30. You can kind of see, I don't know if you saw it when it was doing the tool changes or not, but you know, I've actually got a couple examples like so, right? So can you see this if I hold it here? So here's a 3-inch, right? Here's a 3-inch face mill that I've got, which is still running on BT30, okay? And then I've also just got a 1/8-inch end mill in here, which is pretty small. Can you see that, Bill? You know, so you've also got your collet sets that work in BT30 as well, which is what I use most of the time, right? Keep in mind that this is on the verge of being too big to put in the ATC, being 3-inch. So they really tell you don't go more than 2, okay? So something like this, I would put it in my library and set it up, but then I would have the machine call it up, and I'd put it in by hand and let it machine, and then it'll simply stop, tell me to take it back out, and it'll go right back to either using the ATC or a different library tool when the time comes.
Can you save the ball lock locations in the program?
Can you save the ball lock locations? You can save the upper left one, okay? And I'm assuming the reason you're asking that question is so that you can use coordinates for your G54 and 5 and 6 and so on and so forth. And so you can do that. All of our new VMC products do allow you to do something that you couldn't do in the 2-op, which is you could actually program your entire part from your home position being the ball lock, and then use your offsets to your piece part with your G54, G55, and so on. So that would allow you to program every part from knowing where that destination is coming from. And that is something that I know we could not do with the 2-up. So it is really a good question. Thanks for asking that question.
Larry asks, he asks rigid tapping question mark?
Okay, yep, not a problem at all. Okay, so unlike a DPM that does not have an encoder on the spindle, this is just like every other VMC that we sell, so you can do so without a problem. That's all you got for now? Patrick, you're good?
Yep.
Let me put these tools away. You know, as always, we really don't know how long these live videos are going to last because it really comes down to how many questions we have and stuff like that, you know. Like I said, we're going to do some more extensive videos on 3D stuff and things like that. And as you guys know, because what we told you not too long ago, this is just the first of all the cool stuff that we're going to be showing you guys during 2021. So I'm sure some of the videos may have a lot more questions that come along with them once you see what those products are. But to get you started, you can see that we're pretty excited about this because people have just loved the 2-op and said, if only it could do this, if only it could do what the other machines can. Well, now it can. And so now is probably the time that if you were really wondering whether or not this is something you wanted to do, here you go. We've done it. It'll do everything that you need it to do now and more. And I know we didn't answer everything that somebody's probably going to come up with, but when you got another question, reach out to me, reach out to the home office, reach out to your local rep. I think other than that, we have any other questions, guys?
Larry asked about verified part, which is, I guess, different than showing the tool path.
Right, verified part. I'm not sure if it gets limited to the size of a part program, and I think what happens in here, normally you would have verified part where it would show the entire machining process of the part. I believe when you get into a G-code program that's very, very large, it might not actually show the process. I think what will happen if it gets too large is it'll just show the part when it's completed, okay? Kind of like our KMX product works. It doesn't have the brains in the KMX to show this part of the process. But if you get a big enough G-code program in here, I guarantee you it won't show the whole thing. It'll show most of it.
Donald's asking if we can run something. How long would it take to air run the part that we started with? If we just ran it, you know, didn't cut, but just...
Will I cut it now that it's already been cut?
Yeah.
It's about 7 minutes.
Okay. Do you want to just start the program over so we get some...
I can. I think the question for this is answered?
Yeah. I think so.
Okay, not a problem. Let me just exit out of there. So yeah, so to run that again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to program in and out mode and pull that program back up. Right? So this is telling me I'm just going to override what I was doing. So there we go. So that's the first part of the process. Second part of the process, I got to tell it about the tools I'm using, right? So this time I am using tools from the ATC, even though those tools are in here. And by the way, if you haven't seen this before, whenever I touch a tool that has the same library number, like so, okay, I can make changes in here and I can update everything all at the same time. So if I change to maybe cut a little deeper, it'll update all of them, not just one of them, all right? So just keep that in mind. But what I need to do is tell it about these 3 tools. So I'm just going to simply look in here for my face mill out of my ATC, right? So it's right here. That's tool number 1, right? Whoops. Hey, I should show you that again because I screwed up. Might as well make fun of myself and show what happens, right? So I told it that was tool number 1, and it says, hey, dummy, you're still in tool room ops, okay? So it won't let you screw that part up either, so sometimes you gotta look stupid to show people that the machine's smarter than you are. There we go, tool number 1. Then I'm using a 3/8 end mill, which is right here, tool number 2. I'm using a 1/4 inch end mill, which is right here, tool number 3. So there's my tools. Next thing I would probably do is set my zeros, however they're still set because I haven't changed them, right? So I would probably go in here a lot of times and I'd look at the tool path, make sure it's all right. I know that it is. So I'm going to go to run mode, push start, let it calculate real quick on what it has to do. Can you get a good picture through one of the windows there, bud?
Oh, yeah.
Cool. Okay, so here, like always, I have the ability to either run CNC run or run tracking. I should be able to go right to CNC run, okay? I'm not always that brave, especially when I'm on live video. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to track it a little bit to make sure that I'm in the right place, right? I try to get out of the way of everything and see where I'm at here. Looks good to me. You ready? Stop. CNC run. Let it go.
Larry asks if we still have save temp, open temp.
Yes, sir. Yeah, so save temp and open temp all work the same way as it did before, just like it did in the 2-op. And of course, it also works that way in all of our VMC products now, not just the VMC2. Good questions today. So there you can at least see a little bit of the tool change. So I did do a rectangular profile just to cut the corners off to make them match the inside of the pocket. And originally what I planned on doing was taking the same part, flipping it over, and doing the spherical part that Bruce made on the other side. I'll show you what the part kind of looks like finished when we get done here. And I can answer a few more questions about 3D surfacing and things like that too. I didn't clean anything out in there, but does it look pretty clean?
Yeah,
All right, just making sure.
stuff.
That's good.
The drink covers it.
Cool. I think the really neatest, that's probably not a real word, but probably the coolest thing that we've added in the RX is the ability to do these more complicated tool paths, because this is something that up until now you pretty much had to have a CAD CAM system to do. And by being able to use constant surface footage and chip per tooth and adaptive tool paths, things like that, we can really remove material at a great rate of speed now, just like anybody would be doing in any other CAD CAM system. And again, don't even need a computer. Do it all right at the control. If you're wondering, I probably spent about 10 minutes making the program to do this pocket. It really was as simple as I made it look when I flipped through the pages. And it probably would have been even easier if it wasn't just in my mind and I would have actually had a print, but you know, what fun is that? I do believe that you would still use this VMC2 to do prototype jobs. You know, you're going to have a lot of people that are going to say, hey, I want it sheerly for the size because it's got all that capability, but it does still have a very small footprint. You know, it's 52 inches, I believe, by 30 something, 36.
36 by 52.
Yeah. And so because of that, the only thing you guys might want to be thinking about out there in ProtoTRAK land is when you're moving into that new house, make sure you got an 8-foot garage door, because it'll fit perfectly between the wife's car and your Harley. Okay? So just got to have a little taller door to get it in there, or a very creative rigger. Right now we are all on this camera, correct?
Yep.
All right, just making sure. Any other questions right now, Blake?
No. Donald said it's clean enough for a machinist.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I haven't made the big time yet, so when this film is over, I still have to clean up my own messes. We're working on that part. Right after I get my dressing room. For sure. like the 2-op, it can run on 220 single phase, but normally you're going to be running on 220 3-phase, okay? And I believe you can also run it on 440. Is that true, Patrick? It'd be in the first top of the options.
Yeah, it's 480.
Yeah.
480 volt option.
Yeah, so you can run it on 480 or 440, whatever you want to call it. So you do have all the same capabilities. Keep in mind that if you do run it on single phase, you're going to lose approximately half the horsepower. But you know, I've got a few guys with 2-ops sitting in their garages around here that cut parts all day long in them with half the horsepower, and the neighbors don't even know they're a machine shop. So it's a good thing. Just about done with the roughing pass, huh? Just want to see what you see.
It's a good little angle.
Yeah, it's pretty sharp. Yeah, not a problem. Does he want to see the whole thing, or can we just stop it maybe at the tool change?
We could probably stop the tool change.
All right. Why don't we do that then? I think it'll make a little more sense. I'm going to put these up here for right now. Okay. So can you see all right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right, cool. All right. So can you zoom in on that thing? Where you want it? You want it in front of me so you got a better contrast? So it'll give you a little better idea. You can see, as I machined the rough, you can kind of see some of the witness marks still from the adaptive machining toolpath, the 4 islands here and then the other island in the center, right? So it gives you a pretty good feel for what it did and how it did what it did, right? You see that well enough?
Yeah.
While we're on the subject, this is the part that the program itself actually was going to make to do the opposite part of that. So I was going to flip it in from the pocket being on this side to come in, hog away all that material, and then do the surfacing to finish the part. This particular part here I did in a DPM in one of my previous videos. The part would have been the same shape, but it would have looked a little different because the finishing was actually at a 45-degree angle as it did the 3C surfacing. So that part of it is a little different. But I just wanted to make sure you guys were well aware of the fact that there is no 3-axis proto-track control that we've ever made that can't do 3D surfacing, contrary to what some people like to think about us, okay? Our CNCs work the same as everybody else's on the inside. Obviously, the big difference is how they work in the programming structure, which is what makes them so powerful and simple to understand, okay? So any other questions, men?
We're good.
All right, so in this case, I think what we're going to do is close here. I want to thank all of you guys for watching and getting a little bit better idea about the new VMC2. And until we see you in the next live video, I'm sure we'll have some other vocational type videos in between. One of those will be the 3D surfacing, so look forward to seeing that. As always, any other questions you got, reach out to us, reach out to your local TRAK rep. I'm sure he's going to be happy to show this to you. And until next time, on behalf of my entire crew who do their best to make me look good, I'll see you in the next video. And as always, remember to keep on tracking. Thanks for watching.